really any time, one of the most important things you can do as a citizen is to stay informed. A new book out by two professors from the University of Washington called The Limits of Presidential Power helps us better understand how the executive branch works. Joining me now is one of the book's authors, Kathryn Watts. I'm so glad to have you here. What department do you teach in?
I'm at the law school at the University of Washington.
So what inspired you to write this book at this time?
So last year, in the wake of the election, my colleagues and I had really an outpouring of questions from members of the public, journalists across the country, people hungry for knowledge, wanting to better understand the laws that govern presidential power. So that was the impetus, was us realizing that as law professors, we have a voice that we can use to help educate and empower the public.
It is a bit of an era of law, right? Because we're testing so many of these things and trying to figure out what governs what and how checks and balances work. Why is it important for people to know more about the executive branch?
It's so important because when people, for example, go to the ballot box, they need to know what campaign promises can or can't actually be carried out by a particular president. When they pick up the newspapers and read the headlines, they need to know who in government to hold accountable. We have so many different actors in our government system that are sharing power, and without really understanding who has the legal authority to do what, it's difficult to figure out as a citizen who to hold accountable when you, for example, go to the ballot box.
It's such a good point in terms of trying to differentiate between those things that are mandated by law and those things we've done through norms and traditions. And I think we're finding out that some of those things are different from what we might have assumed. This has been an issue for a few administrations where the opposition party has consistently said that the executive branch has gone too far with executive orders or with the expansion of presidential power. So what can we learn about that from your book?
Absolutely. Controversy surrounding presidential power is not something that is brand new. It's something that at this moment in history, many in our nation are really looking closely at, but it is something that has existed throughout our history. So our book focuses on controversies from the very beginning, from President George Washington forward. For example, President Truman involved in a big controversy involving seizing the nation's steel mills. So from our book, in some ways, you'll be reassured because you'll see that controversy surrounding presidential power is common. But on the other hand, I think you do also see that if people are not paying close attention, if we don't have informed, participatory citizens, then the rule of law can start to erode very quickly. And we all have to do our part to really protect the rule of law.
Are you concerned about that at this point?
It's something that certainly as a law professor who believes deeply in the rule of law, I have been quite concerned to see various signs over the course of the past year where the rule of law has been challenged. For example, particular federal judges called into question. One judge sitting here in Seattle called into question. Those sorts of things as a law professor are concerning, but again, if we all are doing our part and we're involved in protecting the rule of law, then I have much hope that our country will continue to endure just as it has.
Well, your book is obviously a good start. What else would you suggest for citizens who maybe haven't paid a lot of attention over time, vote sporadically, and are suddenly sort of waking up and going, what are they talking about, and need to be better informed? Where do we go? Because I get the feeling our civics education is not really bringing us where we need to be fully informed as voters.
Yeah, so staying informed is obviously the first start, and this book is one place you can start. It's really written to pick up where civics class might have left off for you, or to give you a little recap. Chapter 1 is a quick refresher, and then it goes on from there into a little bit more information, so it can bring you more up to speed so that you are better equipped to read the headlines and to participate. That's one thing. Another thing to remember is vote in every election at every level.
Tell me more about that. Why is that so important?
Well, state and localities, state and local governments, King County, for example, Washington state officials, they exercise a huge amount of power. So if we're talking about an issue like, let's say, climate change, if you care about climate change, it's not just the President of the United States that you should be focusing your attention on. You need to look at Congress at the federal level, but you also need to look at the local level because state and local officials have a huge amount of power to either help push an agenda forward or to push back against an agenda that they don't support. So state and local elections matter tremendously, and yet many Americans don't turn out for those state and local elections. They turn out for the high profile, big ticket type elections.
And even during a presidential election year, our voter participation is relatively low
right.
compared to people who are eligible to vote.
Right.
So the last chapter in your book is devoted to some of these things, what we can do as citizens.
Right.
Are there some other things you'd like to tell us about that?
There's absolutely a number of things that you can do. One of them also is just speak up. Exercise your First Amendment right and speak up. But the book explores some pretty straightforward ways to participate. For example, a website, regulations.gov, www.regulations.gov. If you have views or thoughts on things like climate change, clean water, gun regulation, there's rulemaking proceedings going on at that you can access through that website, and you can file a comment, write out your views, and share your views with the government very easily.
You had a number of websites, in fact, that help us just look up what's true. Maybe if you have a question about what's included in DACA and what's not, you can actually find all this out on your own. You don't have to wait for somebody to tell you on Twitter. So there were a lot of resources that you listed there and a lot of tips. In terms of raising good citizens, as we're raising our kids, you have them, everybody's got kids and grandkids out there. What can we say to them? And I don't mean in terms of political indoctrination. I'm hoping everybody's kids will get informed and make the decision that they think is best. But how do we help them know how important this is and get more people voting?
That's such a great question. One of my favorite justices, the first female justice on the Supreme Court, has been quoted as saying that democracy, it's not passed down through the gene pool. We have to talk to our kids about it. We have to teach our kids about how our government is structured. One great resource to start with, it's a site called ICivics.org. ICivics.
ICivics.
ICivics. I like a small I and then civics.org. And Justice O'Connor was one of the founders of that. They have some fantastic video games, free video games that kids can play, like
so
Win the White House.
Science video games?
Exactly.
This is revolutionary.
Exactly. They teach kids about elections. They enable the kids to simulate running for the White House and picking their running mate. My kids are addicted to these games, so it's kind of like eating your broccoli. It's good for you, and they learn something and have fun.
Oh, that's a wonderful suggestion. Thank you. I feel like we have some places to go now between the book and the resources that you've talked about. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate you being here. Up next, important safety reminders for kids using the internet. You can go to iCivics whenever you want, but there's some other things you should know about. We'll be back after this.